Hey y'all, so welcome. This is a bit of a different video that we have here. So there is a new film that's being produced and released soon, sometime in the spring of 2024, and it's pretty straightforward, at least what the premise of the film is about. It's called Civil War by A24, directed by Alex Garland, and yeah, it's a pretty topical film that's being, sort of spoken on, in terms of like the culture war discourse. And of course, it's releasing in an election year, a very politically divisive election year. So it is an interesting concept. And, there's not that many films that even explore the idea of a second civil war. I mean, there have been like more small budget films, but this is like the true big budget production. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm not going to pretend that this is going to be any good. I mean, it could go either way. It could be, complete trash, or at least an entertaining watch. And it will be interesting to see what sort of political message, if any, they put on the show, on the TV, for the film. So yeah, so this here, as I said, it's being directed by Alex Garland. It has some big names, some big actors that we'll see in this trailer. And yeah, there's just a lot of, I mean, it's a trailer, so it's not going to give us the whole plot, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of political messaging and world building, essentially. And it'll be interesting to, observe the geopolitics that are in this film. And also, we can give highlights and, sort of context from the first Civil War, because the first Civil War still very much has an effect and legacy on our current political, establishment. So there's much to observe here and discuss. But yeah, so of course we'll just dive in here, and I'll just let it play for at least like the first 30 seconds, because there's like a lot that's sort of pushed out. Again, they have to set up the whole story and get people's interest in the film. So let's watch here and put on, and I have the captions on. So let's just watch it.
19 states have seceded.
The United States Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president assures the uprising will be dealt with swiftly.
Let me know if you want to try anything on.
I guess aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on all across America.
We just try to stay out. With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
Okay, so yeah, that is a pretty strong introduction. Let's go ahead and go back.
19 states.
Okay, so here, the very first shot, there's an American skyline, and I believe this might be New York, because I do see a Chrysler building or something that's similar to that. I mean, we don't really know. I'm not going to generalize here. But yeah, there's an American city skyline, and then there's smoke. So that's pretty strong opening, at least. It's not something that we see very often, especially war. So here, first lines: 19 states have seceded, and then let's move a little further, and then actually
States have seceded.
The United States Army.
Yeah, the United States Army's ramps
Army
up
ramps up
activity.
activity.
The White House issued.
And then the White House issued warnings, and then they continued further to the Western forces of this alliance between California and Texas.
Issued warnings to the Western.
Yeah, there we go. So Western forces of Florida. No, Western forces and Florida. So they're highlighting there's different factions and alliances, and there's a map later on, so I'll observe that. But yeah, so here we have a scene of an abandoned street, abandoned highway. And of course our main characters, and it appears that they're journalists. They're on this road trip, or road trip is a light way to say it, but they're just on a journey following the war. So who knows what timeline this is. I mean, this could be at least the opening weeks of the war, opening months, possibly a year into it. There's not very clear on what the timeline is, although it seems as though this is pretty early on. So let's continue here.
Forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president.
Okay, so this is important. Of course, we have an interior view of our main characters, and also, yeah, we have our actors here. So there's Wagner Moura, There's Kirsten Dunst, and I have another one here, and to make sure I have them right. So yeah, Stephen McKinley Henderson. So they're pretty good, pretty strong actors. So yeah, of course they say here, 3-term president. So of course, with any civil war, we have to ask, what is the cause? The civil wars just don't happen. There's a political reason behind it. So of course, a 3-term president, that would precipitate a constitutional crisis, and certainly divisions within our political establishment. So yeah, I wonder if they go any deeper than that. Of course, a 3-term presidency, that's a pretty simple and straightforward reason for a civil war. It would be nice at least if they expand on other factors, because civil wars don't just occur because of political instability. They can also occur because of economic instability. Of course, we're experiencing economic crisis, cost of living crisis, and of course something that could be more topical would be like climate change affecting agricultural production. There's of course we had our pandemic, so that could also be exacerbated in the civil war. So it'll be interesting to see if it's just they just get hung up on the 3-term presidencies to sort of downplay any sort of real topical political issues, or if they expand on other factors. So let's
President assures the uprising
of course we have other
will be dealt with.
actors here. So our main actors. So I'm not exactly sure, because there's of course our protagonist Kirsten Dunst, Wagner Moura. They're journalists. There's a younger character here that might be their kid. Who knows who they are? But yeah, now they're entering into a clothing store. So just a regular old small town clothing store.
With swiftly.
Let me know.
Everything's sort of continuing. I mean, people need to shop. People need to sell items. It's just life goes on. This could be the battle, the war could be on a front line, sort of detached from their position. So there could be a civil war going on, but if you're in a small town away from the front line, you might have maybe small scale sort of interpersonal divisions, but there's no major fighting. So you're just gonna continue as normal because business has to go. I wonder at least what exchange that they would have if, say, like the financial system has completely fallen apart in these small town areas where people have to barter instead because there's not much they can do with money. But yeah, it's interesting to see. So let's
If you want to try anything on.
Are you guys aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on all across America?
Okay, so yeah. So this is a pretty much, I heard some people saying like, oh, well, they're just trying to be like, asking, pretty simple questions. I mean, they are journalists, so it's kind of fair for them to ask questions like that to figure out like what the common Americans are feeling. And of course, yeah, I mean, a civil war is not something that is usual in our country. So, it would cause a bit of some whiplash because, I mean, this is not something that we're used to. But after a certain point, depending on the timeline here, if it's like a couple months into the conflict, people could just be normal by it. Like you can't just be hunkered down and like in shock and fear all the time. You have to continue business, right? This is a retail store. You got it. Life goes on. You just adapt to it. And again, it's much easier to adapt to it if it's like the fighting is far away. That you're just like, yeah, sure, the war might be all over the country, but there's no fighting here. Nobody's dying. So yeah, we just continue.
We just try to.
Yeah, exactly. So she's saying we try to stay out of it. And how many Americans do you know who like barely? I mean, like, there are Americans who barely paid attention to this pandemic. Like they just, oh, we don't want to think about it. The riots, the George Floyd riots. People didn't want to think about that. It's pretty, yeah. I mean, a lot of Americans, they just don't want to have to deal with the real world ramifications that are unfolding. So yeah, so she's just reading a book, trying to run her store, run her business. I mean, life has to go on. She's probably got to feed her kids and such.
Stay out with what we see on the news.
Okay. So another scene here. Here we have refugees, with their suitcases. Who knows where they're heading? Of course, there's a burned out car. And again, I said that this is sort of a big budget production. At the same time, though, it's still like low budget in a sense. So we'll see, because I mean, there's just like one burnt out car. Of course, there's an earlier scene where there was a whole highway. But again, you would see scenes like this. I mean, again, there's like towns like this that just look like this, burnt out vehicles. But yeah, I mean, you would see scenes like this where there are people on the move and there's just not much you can do for them. Yeah, so of course
News
here,
seems like it's
you can hardly make it out, but yeah, it does say press on the hood. So yeah, our characters are journalists. And of course, some of the right-wing, comments that have been coming out, they're saying, oh, of course, the journalists are the good guys, which is like, yeah, I mean, the journalists are non-combatants, and generally speaking, you need journalists in these sort of conflicts and, sort of unrest situations. It could help that our journalist protagonists, they're the main like observers, sort of, taking our position. We're like the surrogate characters. So people watching this film can just observe it neutrally instead of, watching it from the perspective of, say, like the super badass soldier just like going into combat and fighting. And so yeah, it's interesting to see that, and just to at least have their perspective and their view of the fighting that's unfolding.
for the best.
Okay, and then another scene here, we have a military base, a forward operating base, however you want to call it. We have some Chinooks and Humvees. They're on the move, so we don't exactly know what is happening. I was observing here, at least you can see this flag. We can hardly make it out, but there are two big stars, and we'll see later that that's possibly the flag of one of the rebel factions. So here, yeah, we have the Chinook helicopters transporting or on the move, who knows what they're up to. Okay, let me actually go back.
With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
Okay, so then here, not exactly sure what city this is supposed to be, but yeah, we have unrest in the cities, we have riot police, and you can hardly make it out. I think this might be like a bit of a ration line, because of course if there's a civil war, our supply systems and supply chains are going to fall apart. So yeah, so of course the people in the cities are now having to, line up for food and rations. Yeah, we have one, citizen here with a water bottle or water, gallon. But then, yeah, of course, we Americans, I mean, we had, if you remember, at least from the early days of the lockdown, the pandemic, there were supply chain problems and supply issues. And I mean, we ran out of toilet paper. People were fighting over toilet paper. So you can imagine that if there was a complete breakdown of, all the supply systems and supply chains for food and water, then that would cause even greater instability. And then, of course, the police state response, because there would just be complete martial law. Okay, so here again, we have troops, and it's unsure whether these are federal troops or rebel troops. I mean, either National Guard or U.S. Army. They're attacking a fortified position. They have armor support. So yeah, pretty standard assault on a fortified position. Okay, shooting of a machine gun. I don't exactly know my weapons, but again, this is this would be a machine gun, firing at combatants. Okay, so here, yeah, so we saw earlier, just a second ago, would look to be federal troops or National Guard, whoever, actual like regular troops. Here, at least, we can see that these are more of a irregular militias, and if you notice clearly, they're all wearing Hawaiian shirts. So this could be sort of a reference to the right-wing Boogaloo Boys or other Proud Boys militias that would certainly take up arms and become a problem in the Civil War scenario. Of course, wearing a Hawaiian shirt in combat is like the worst thing to do. So this might be a scene of these Boogaloo Boys, the stand-in for Boogaloo Boys, going into battle and then being wiped out by more hardened Delta operators or federal troops. I mean, again, imagine wearing like a red and white shirt in urban combat, like you're just dead immediately. So yeah, and then we have our protagonist. I would assume our protagonist being a photojournalist. Okay, so then here, as I said, let me do a little further. Oh, okay. Okay, so that's the best we can get. So, yeah, as I said, there are 2 stars here, so this could be one of the rebel factions, and I'm assuming this is going to be the Western Alliance of, they'll expand further, of Texas and California. So we'll see here.
Citizens of America.
Okay, so then here, of course, we have a shot of New York. I mean, otherwise, other than that smoke plume, everything seems pretty normal. I would assume major urban centers such as New York would have relative security compared to other places, say like in the Midwest or small towns. So yeah.
The so-called Western.
Okay, so then here we can see it's the same shot of the Boogaloo Boys, and they're clearing out a position. I mean, who knows what sort of scenario this is being presented. But yeah, then of course, we heard that the president, as we'll see later, the president speaking on a defeat of the Western forces of Texas and California. Now, of course, people were making fun of that. And of course, that seems like a huge improbability of Texas and California working together. I mean, who knows what sort of political scenario is unfolding here. I'm curious, at least, because they're talking about the president having 3 terms, what political affiliations he would have if he's supposed to be a liberal. I mean, again, it's kind of hard imagining a liberal taking authoritarian measures, but then again, like anything's possible. So it's supposed to be a democratic, more liberal presidency, or a conservative, more authoritarian right-wing presidency. And how exactly would Texas and California band together to fight against the federal forces? Who knows? Maybe this could be purposefully written to be a paper-thin alliance, more of a alliance out of convenience. That they have this political differences. So sort of like the Soviets and the Allies in World War II, because they were ideologically hated each other, but they had to work together for the moment to fight against Nazi Germany, who was the greater threat. So who knows? Who knows what scenario or conditions would cause Texas and California to work together? Of course, like outside of the major cities, Texas or California, it's a pretty right-wing red state. Like if you just it's it's sort of indistinguishable, and like a lot of Californians who are leaving California, they're coming to Texas. So it's not that out of the blue. But again, though, like imagining Greg Abbott and Gavin Newsom working together, I don't know how that would pan out. But again, we'll just have to watch the film. So then, yeah, of course, we have these militias fighting.
Forces of Texas.
Okay, so now we have the shot of the president, and it is the man himself, Nick Offerman. Now, my headcanon for this film is that this is taking place in like the Parks and Rec universe, and this is Ron Swanson becoming a more of a libertarian populist and essentially just taking over the government. So it's it would make it a little funnier just to imagine it like that, which I mean it's honestly like not the worst sort of theory to have. But yeah, so we have President, I'm gonna call him President Swanson. But yeah, he is assuming a 3rd term. Who knows what his reason is? Like it could be for many reasons. We'll just have to watch the film. But yeah, as he said, the so-called Western forces of Texas and California, and he'll expand on their defeat in the battle.
In California.
Okay, so now the Boogaloo Boys are now engaging in combat. They're wearing their Hawaiian vests or Hawaiian shirts with their tactical vests, and they're assaulting, I'm assuming, federal troops. And then, of course, one of their comrades is fallen. Oh, and then we have here a press, journalist. So it could be Kirsten Dunst or some other character, who knows. And written and directed by Alex Garland.
Have suffered a very great.
Okay, so as we saw, the president is addressing the nation, and again, as I said, it's unclear what the timeline of this conflict is. If this is the opening weeks of the conflict, where there may be some semblance of normalcy, but then just like a general breakdown of the fighting, and of course, we see here there's like fire in the background. So imagine that you're in your apartment, you're trying to be as normal as possible, but then you just look out the window and then you see explosions, maybe even like gunfire, tracer rounds. Like, you would just have to learn to live with it. Like, that's just all you can do. So here, of course, we have a character watching the TV, and then
Defeat.
she notices the fire in the background.
At the hands of the.
And then this is important. So, of course, you have more of the fire, and I'm not sure if this is New York or some other city, but here at least we can see the sort of map and factions that are unfolding. So we have here, I'm assuming the white is the federal forces, and then we can see here they mentioned earlier the Florida Alliance, so it could be the Deep South states. So yeah, see here Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. I'm not sure if Georgia is here. Yeah, maybe Georgia is in the federal. Who knows? We have Florida, the Deep South, Texas. You would assume Texas would align themselves with the Deep South Florida Alliance. I mean, that makes the most sense. But anyway, Texas and California, they're their own independent faction, the Western Forces, which Texas and California would be powerhouses. They're the two most powerful states, the richest states in the country. So them working together would certainly be powerful. And then, of course, we have the white forces, the federal forces. And here, like the Pacific Northwest and more of the northern Midwestern states, they're their own faction, which, I mean, what would they even accomplish? I mean, it would probably be just more like irregular militias. Yeah, I mean, very depopulated area, practically no industry. I mean, I would imagine California would sweep up into the Pacific Northwest, and federal forces just overtaking the Midwest. But again, who knows? So that is here. And of course, I think Hawaii and Alaska are also in control by the federal forces, which is not hard to imagine. Maybe in like places like Alaska, because it's a very rural region, that there would be insurgents hiding out in the countryside, in the wilderness. But otherwise, you can just control the major cities, which aren't really that populated. And in Hawaii, of course, you just have the Navy take it over. It would be interesting also just to imagine the territories, so say like Puerto Rico, American Samoa, the Virgin Islands, their situation as well. Again, I would imagine the U.S. Navy occupying those areas. But yeah, there would just be like a general breakdown of the state and all these different states coalescing and organizing together. So sort of a battle royale. This sort of reminds me, if you play Hearts of Iron 4, the Kaiserreich mod, where there is a second civil war and the different factions there. Yeah, in fact, I'm probably going to play that later today. So that is at least the map here. It's not the clearest, but it does give us an idea of the state of the war. And as I said in the beginning, 19 states seceded. And again, this seems as though this is supposed to take place in like the early stages of the war. So yeah, so we'll see a little further.
United States military.
Okay, so then yeah, they say here, the writer of 28 Days Later, Ex Machina, Annihilation. So these are pretty solid films. There are more like sci-fi and of course, horror sort of films. So this is more of a political thriller. So we'll see how they are able to present that.
Mr. President, do you regret the use of...
Yeah, okay. So then here, yeah, so this is definitely New York. Yeah, so we can see different places. And I would assume this is sort of a ration line. Again, there would just be like a general breakdown of the social order. And then, of course, there's a journalist talking here. Oh, Mr. President, do you regret the use of airstrikes? Man, could you imagine if the United States bombed civilian populations? Man, crazy.
Of airstrikes against American citizens.
Yeah. So it's not hard to imagine the United States, the President of the United States, ordering airstrikes, drone strikes on American cities. That's precisely what would happen. And we can see here, this might be F-35s. Although in the event of, say, like an airstrike, you wouldn't really see the planes, like, just like hovering overhead. Most of these airstrikes you would never see coming, but this is for cinematic purposes. Yeah, so we have our characters in that same ration line, I would assume, running for cover. Yeah, so then there's airstrikes here. And of course you can see here an encampment. Who knows what sort of, part of that city. This could be Queens or Brooklyn, who knows?
They're moving.
Okay, so then here we see some MRAPs, and we have our character Wagner Mora. And yeah, they're talking about the Western forces moving into DC. So who knows how quickly they've done that, what timeline this war is. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine Texas and California forces moving so quickly to Washington without like some sort of conflict in between that. So who knows what happened in between DC and, say, Texas, because Texas would be like the closest. And then, of course, they had to contend with the Florida Alliance. So there's that as well.
To DC today.
Okay, so this is probably the earlier shot of the base. We see some vehicles. There's an Abrams, Humvees, trucks here. There's the flag, the 2-star flag. There's Chinooks. So yeah, so they have a forward operating base here. And who knows exactly where this is taking place at.
We need to go down there.
Yeah, and then of course you have our characters. So Kirsten Dunst, Wagner Mora. Right, and so
They
here, another shot of New York.
Journalists on site in the cap.
New York again. And then we have a sniper rifle here. So they're saying here, right, they shoot journalists on site in the Capitol. And I saw earlier some comments from some of the right-wing posters saying like, oh man, like don't give me a good time. So it'll be interesting to see how the right, the alt-right respond to this. They'll probably hate it, or they'll appropriate it, sort of like with Far Cry 5. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see that.
Every instinct.
Again, another shot here. This is more of a bombed out city, bombed out vehicles, stray dogs running around, so just.
And he says this is death. Blooded.
Okay, this might be the same Boogaloo Boys, sort of clearing out a building. And then we have our character, photojournalist. Now, this has a bit of a, I don't know what sort of effect this is. So this may be more of a flashback, the way that it's shot.
Time, my sir.
And then we have scenes here in Arabic. This may be a flashback to her work as a photojournalist, say, in Iraq, Afghanistan. And of course, she's saying here, yeah, every time I survive the war zone. So she is, been used to combat, and now she's seen that combat coming home. Yeah, she'll highlight her, a little further. So every time I survive the war zone.
Survive the war zone.
Okay. And then here we have another scene. Who knows what the circumstances are, but we have two victims of an execution, lynching. Who knows what the circumstances are. We have our younger character here, which could be her daughter. I don't know. We have another character. So he's not one of the main characters, but he is armed. We can see here. It could be that he's escorting them or holding them hostage. I mean, she seems pretty scared. I'm not sure if she's scared of the execution or the man behind her. We do have our, I believe, Kirsten Dunst in the background.
I thought I was sending a warning.
Yeah, so they're just exchanging looks, so they don't exactly know what they're going into. And then she explains further, I thought I was sending a warning home. So she went abroad to see combat and, violence And now that violence is coming home.
Oh, don't do that.
And then, yeah, we have our President Swanson, smiling. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see how they expand on him. Now we have here a character, or your militant, who knows if he is involved with the federal forces. I doubt it, at least, because he seems a little more grizzled. And we can see here he has dyed hair, painted nails. I even just noticed that, actually, painted nails. So it could be more of a militia, either National Guard or militia or a militant. But yeah, he's all gillied up. And I do like the way that they're portraying the militants, because they're dirty, they're busted up. He has some blood on him. He's all unshaven. So it's nice to see that. I mean, there are some films where I've seen that are supposed to be war films, but then everybody is all clean, and their clothes is perfect, and they're all good looking. And not to say this guy isn't good looking, but like here we see like the actual the degradation and the conditions that would be precipitated in the Civil War. So yeah, so he's taking a shot, all gillied up, and he could. I would weigh more on the side that this is a militia, irregular militant, rather than federal troops.
Okay.
Yeah, and then our characters here.
Here we are.
There's some kind of misunderstanding here.
What?
And this is our boy, Jesse Plemons. So we got the power couple, because Kirsten Dunst and Plemons, they are married. But yeah, no, this is interesting to see him playing as, I'm presuming that he is also a right-wing militia sort of character. I mean, look, he's wearing glasses, rose-colored glasses, and he's really just wearing fatigues. So he's not wearing any sort of combat gear, any tactical gear. Maybe this is looted equipment. He's sort of, he has 2 watches on. Just noticed that, or maybe that's a compass or something. Yeah. So he's just like, of course, we have our character Wagner Moura, sort of trying to de-escalate the situation, saying, "Oh, we're all Americans here." So yeah, and then we have our character Jesse Plemons. So we'll just expand further.
Well, you're American, okay? Okay. What kind of American are you?
Yeah, so that's such a cold line. So they're being held up, and again, I'm assuming that this is a militia sort of character, maybe a character, a militant belonging to the Florida Alliance, because they're going to be interesting people, to say the least. Yeah, we can see here he has blood on his hands, dried blood, and yeah, he's just questioning them, and of course he's having fun with them. It's just very much reminding me of Game Night, where it's just like, how could that possibly be profitable for Frito-Lay's, So he's sort of channeling that character. I mean, hey, if I saw Jesse Plemons holding me at gunpoint with rose-colored glasses, I'm gonna be scared. Yeah, so everybody's sort of frozen, and of course, we're trying to all be like, oh, we're all Americans here, we're all one country, but this is a civil war now, so that sort of unity is gone. Yeah, so just complete breakdown of social order.
You don't know?
Okay, so yeah, so more of that, questioning and possible execution. So right, this it's this.
The Western forces.
So yeah, so more shots here. They're saying here the Western forces will reach the White House.
Will reach the White House on July 4th.
On July 4th. So yeah, that is. I mean, again, this is just probably for the writing purposes, the thematic purposes. Well, it's July 4th, and there's a Civil War, and Washington D.C. falls. So yeah, Then we have our characters taking cover. Some more fighter jets, And then these are different press corps journalists. Okay, so yeah, so the characters are fleeing something, and then we have these subtitles. So all empires fall. So that's sort of the tagline there. Let me go back. So yeah, so more shots of the base, and I'm assuming again this is the Western forces. So we have the Chinooks here. I see Apaches. There's an Abrams, I believe. Yeah, it's just more shots of the same base. Okay, now we have some fighting here. Now I'm unsure if this is supposed to be New York or Washington D.C., but yeah, we'll see a little further. Okay, so most likely it's D.C. Well, I mean it is. Yeah, so that's D.C. here. We have the Washington Memorial, the monument, and then we can see here some rounds, tracer rounds from the CRAM, sort of like defense system. So yeah, so that would be looking exactly like if we were to imagine a battle in Washington D.C. This would be sort of similar to what it would be. And we have some forces here, some troops. I'm assuming since they're trying to lay low that these are the Western forces. Okay, now they're in the forest.
They're gonna hang back.
Okay, so this is more of the fighting, and this is the White House here. So of course, it's sort of hard to imagine Washington D.C. sort of like falling this quickly. Again, if this is like the early stages of the fighting, then it's possible that D.C. would fall. But then again, I would imagine Washington being quickly fortified, just completely entrenched. It would be a fortress city. If you remember from the first Civil War, Washington D.C. was the most fortified city in the world. So yeah, there would be huge fortifications unless they're overrunning the capital in like the early months of the fighting. So yeah, and then of course we have a rocket launch here at some troops.
I'm not hanging back.
Yeah, and then more fighting here. This could possibly be the Western troops. Who knows? And then we have President Swanson.
One nation under God.
Okay, and this is just some more action sequences. Who knows what this is about?
Indivisible.
Okay, then we have our Abrams here. They're assaulting, and I'm assuming this is the Washington D.C. battle.
With liberty.
Okay, and then we have an Apache shooting at a building. And now they're inside the White House. So the White House fell pretty quickly. These would be, I presume, the Western forces. So yeah, so then we got here.
And justice for all.
Yeah, sort of interesting that it would fall that quickly. But then again, this is a movie, so yeah. Here we go. Okay, let me go back actually. Oh, come on.
And justice for all.
Okay. Now, I did notice at least this recording where he's saying justice for all. It kind of cuts off that all, so I don't know if that's like a fault of the editing. Okay, and then here they're inside, I presume, the Oval Office. This doesn't look like President Swanson. This probably is like some intern, staffer. But yeah, they're dragging him out, and who knows what they're going to do with him. Okay, and now they're exploding the Lincoln Memorial, which is a bit poignant. It's the Second Civil War, and of course, as Lincoln said, a house divided will fall. So, blowing up the Lincoln Memorial is pretty symbolic. And then, yeah, some more shots. So again, this is the Lincoln Memorial, and we have an Apache flying through the smoke, and then this is just a general overview of the city and the fighting. Yeah, pretty intense.
God bless America.
And there's the title. So Civil War. That's interesting. Yeah, spring 2024. So that's an interesting sort of outcome here, sort of film. And yeah, and I'll expand a little further on some other YouTubers and their comments. So as I made my observations and comments for this trailer. I did want to highlight at least the sort of reaction that is going to undoubtedly sort of precipitate because of this extremely topical subject matter, politically divisive subject matter. Yeah, I mean, many right-wingers, alt-right commentators, they're certainly going to weigh in on this. And I wanted to at least highlight one of the commentators from the comments from Tim Pool. So he is, of course, a commentator who has, spoken, sort of clickbaited all kinds of videos about civil war. He always throws that word around. So we'll see here at least his sort of observation and comments. Not that it's anything of substance, but it's just at least we could see here what the sort of opinion of the right wing is for this video or this trailer. So we'll see here.
It's the moment you've all been waiting for. News dropped that a new film is coming out in 2024 called Civil War. And what is it about? Oh man, you better believe I'm excited. It is a film about a civil war in the United States. And I gotta say, based on the trailer, I'm gonna go, meh. It is funny that this trailer drops and I get all these people tweeting at me being like, Tim Pool, what do you think? Yo, let me start by saying this. The reason the movie exists has nothing to do with me. The reason I talk...
Right. So, of course, it's sort of interesting that he has to even, sort of insert himself here. Again, it's sort of... He's kind of, inflating his importance on the subject matter. Like, if there's a civil war, he's going to be the one to be like, oh, see, I called it. And it's like, he's just opportunistically sort of shouting into a microphone. That's really what he's doing. But yeah, let's continue further.
Talk about Civil War is the same reason someone made a movie about it. It's the same reason Stephen Marsh wrote a book about it. It's the same reason why numerous news outlets have written the same thing. We are all looking at an ever-expanding culture war, division among states, and many people advocating for national divorce, including elected members of Congress. So, you may watch my show and think Tim Pool talks about this a lot, but I gotta be honest, I probably talk about it less than many in the corporate press.
That's not true. He has many videos, many thumbnails, just him screaming about civil war. Again, when Trump got indicted, civil war. So he throws that word around a lot, and now he's saying that he doesn't, which is not true. I mean, you can't even really hear. I can't even imagine any single corporate media outlet even entertaining the notion of a civil war. But this guy, he throws it around all the time. That's his main sort of it's like a meme, right? Oh well, yeah. So yeah, we'll just see a little further.
Large brand, several of these news outlets have way more articles about civil war than videos I produce. I'm a single person.
Again, not true. He posts about it a lot.
But if you only watch my show, or you mostly watch it, you'll see stories about civil war pop up or the conversation happen. Somebody invested a lot of money into making a movie about civil war. Why? It's on the American mind. It's in the media. It's in...
Because of people like him who get stuck on these culture war issues, and they try to pretend as though America is divided, but it's mainly because of these alt-right grifters pulling away and creating divisions, just being stuck on, say, issues like trans rights or just other culture war topics that distract the general public from broader class issues. So, yeah, the reason why we're having talks about civil war is because of these right-wingers creating these divisions, artificially, creating these fears and suspicions of marginalized groups and so on.
Books. It's coming from the mouths of Princeton professors. And that resulted in me saying, hey guys, I think this might be right. Now, The Verge writes, the next film from the director Alex Garland looks like quite the action-packed dystopia. A24 just released the first trailer for Civil War, which is set in a near-future version of the U.S. that, as you can probably guess, is in the midst of a violent civil war with forces from Texas and California making their way to the White House. It's hard to glean too many story details from the trailer, but it features a small group attempting to infiltrate a heavily fortified Washington, D.C. It also features the tagline, "All empires fall." So they got a lot of people in it. I want to pull up the trailer here for you, and I want to actually let's review this thing. Let's talk.
Yeah, so of course he's going to do his reaction, so I'm essentially reacting to a reaction, but it's just interesting to see his comment and his response, especially, early on, him saying that like, "Oh, I'm probably not the one talking about it," even though he does all the time. So yeah, this guy, at least we could see here from his response and his reaction to this film, the general consensus and sort of reaction from other alt-right commentators and grifters. So at least we'll see his reaction.
Let's talk about it. Before we do, however,
and then of course he has a self-insert. So
friends,
we'll see.
If you want to help win the culture war, go to the best.
Exactly. So this is what it's all about. He does these comments and he does these culture war issues that he likes to pretend that he's not sort of instigating to get people to listen to other. He has a band. I don't know. So yeah, it's all a grift for him. So he gets you with these titles. Reacts to new Civil War, second U.S. American Civil War, and then really it's for his listeners to go on his Apple iTunes store, to listen to his music or some other business venture. So that's all it is. It's all a grift.
Songever.com. Pre-order Together Again. This is our new song. The reason it's the best song ever, and I can say that, is because it wasn't written by me.
So that's sort of a self-report. Like, why would you say that about your music?
It was written by Smokey Mike and the God King. I don't know who the writing credit goes, so I got to ask it. Jeremy Boring, most likely. And it's Jeremy Boring and Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire wrote a song. We did a modern version of it. It is, I would guess it's like synth pop. Promo is up on my Twitter account. And if you want to help us stick it to the machine and the man.
So sticking it to the man. That's all it's about. He's just trying to get people to listen to his music.
And have this combined FU to woke captured industry. Pre-order the song now. It comes out on the 15th. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so again, a very serious subject matter. We're talking about the possibility of civil war in the United States. But before that, listen to my music.
Fun. But let's check out what's currently going on in American media right now. We have the Civil War trailer. All right. Let's play this and see what's going on.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president assures the uprising will be...
Three-term president, Western forces, Florida Alliance. Let's jump in. I don't want to watch the full thing, right? Let's
dealt with swiftly.
Let me know if you want to try anything on.
Are you guys aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on all across America?
We just try to stay out. With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
So let me make a point for all of you right now. Oh boy, I love it. So in the first scene, they're in a clothing store, and the woman working the clothing store says, "Let me know if you want to try anything on." And he's like, "You do know there's a civil war, right?" It's an interesting thing that would never happen. In reality, when war happens, there will be no circumstance where someone walks into a store and is shocked and goes, "You're still selling things, but there's a war." They're doing that for you because you're thinking that. The average American has no idea what war is like. But as those of you who've watched my show know, in war, industry doesn't stop. It stops where it's blown up. But take a look at videos coming out of like Syria during the Syrian civil war also long ago.
Okay, so I wanted to give a pause there. So again, I wanted to highlight that the characters are journalists. So it's not out of the ordinary for them to ask questions like that, to get a feel for what people are experiencing. And yeah, that is a bit of a question that a journalist would ask a shopkeeper. It's like, "Oh, don't you know there's a war going on? Like, how can you continue like normal?" Like, that's, again, Tim Pool has actually traveled to, I wouldn't say war zones, but he'll mention later the Egypt revolution. So he has experience abroad in conflict situations.
Like what, 10 years ago now at this point. And you'll see that people are walking through blown up streets and rubble everywhere, and they're carrying goods. Why? They need to eat. I tell the story all the time. I was in Egypt. I'm staring down from the Hilton building, watching a revolution take place. And right down at the base of this building is a McDonald's with some dude watching soccer. Like nothing's going on. We're in the middle of a revolution in Egypt. We take a car to Heliopolis and go to the mall. And it's people walking around. They're eating kebab. They're buying cell phones as if nothing was happening. And nobody's...
Again, the revolution in Egypt, although it certainly was unstable, it wasn't a complete civil war sort of breakdown of society. So, yeah, it would be easy to imagine folks in Cairo going about their business as there's protests and unrest. Of course, that's different than a full-scale civil war, dividing the country, breaking down the infrastructure, supply chains. That's entirely different. But again, the characters that he's, commenting on, the shopkeepers, they seem to be more separate from the frontline combat. So yeah, life would continue as normal. So, it's, yeah.
He stopped to ask about it. They went on with their lives. Let's play some more. So I guess Kirsten Dunst plays a journalist. You have this flag with 2 stars on it. I love this. I guess the argument is that California and Texas joined forces? Impossible.
Of America.
The so-called Western forces of Texas and California.
Never going to happen. Texas and California will not be a unified alliance with states between them. Why? Dude, Alex Garland, whoever made this movie, maybe they answer this. Maybe they create some kind of circumstance that makes sense. Fine, so be it. Perhaps it's just Deus ex machina, God from the machine. They said it, so it's true. But if you actually read about the American Civil War, you'd know that Texas joined the Confederacy because of geography.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there because he's trying to explain a situation of Texas and California, joining together. And then he goes on to the first American Civil War, which wouldn't necessarily apply here. I don't exactly know where he's trying to go with, but he's trying to say something like, oh, well, it's about geography. Texas joined the Confederacy because of geography. So, we'll see here.
Texas didn't actually, I'm sure there was still sentiment for Texas, but the issue was basically, we are surrounded by the Confederacy. We cannot be a Union state. We'll be conquered in 2 seconds.
Okay, so again, that's just fundamentally incorrect because Texas was, part of the Confederacy. They were a major supporter of the Confederacy. If you really think about it, the whole basis for Texas and the Texas Revolution against Mexico was over slavery. Mexico banned and prohibited slaves, but of course the Americans that they allowed to resettle brought their slaves, and that caused a huge issue for them. So again, it's not a geography thing. It was economic. Slavery was an economic issue for the South. So they were staunch supporters. And even if we can go a little further, the governor at the time, the first president of the Texas Republic and the commander-in-chief of the Texas forces during the Revolution, Sam Houston, who was governor during the 1860s, he was a staunch unionist. So for the most part, while these other states were seceding, and we can see here, the other states were seceding and joining the Confederacy, he was sort of delaying it. They pretty much they couped him. That's what they did. They forced him to resign. So let me see here. Actually, if we can look at the comments here that he made. So he says here in April 19th, 1861, let me tell you what is coming. After the sacrifice of countless millions of treasures and hundreds of thousands of lives, you may win Southern independence if God be not against you, but I doubt it. I tell you that, while I believe with you in the doctrine of states' rights, the North is determined to preserve this union. They are not a fiery, impulsive people as you are, for they live in colder climates. But when they begin to move in a given direction, they move with the steady momentum and perseverance of a mighty avalanche. And what I fear is they will overwhelm the South. So his point here is that they were reluctantly joining the Confederacy because they were surrounded by Confederates, when no, the legislators, they were very much in support of secession and maintaining the institution of slavery. And it was delayed because of the efforts of the governor, Sam Houston, who they eventually forced to resign. So, I mean, think about that. Sam Houston is sort of like the George Washington for this state. I mean, I live in Huntsville. You know, this is where he's buried. I went to Sam Houston, which is dedicated to him, Sam Houston State University. So he is an important figure for the state, and the fact that they went against him to secede shows that they were very much enthusiastic to secede, to maintain slavery. It wasn't just some reluctant, oh, well, we're surrounded and this is a geographic issue. No, they were wanting to maintain their economic interests, to maintain slavery.
In the initial stages of the Civil War, we didn't call it the Civil War, it was called the War Between States, but even before then, it was called the Rebellion. The Confederacy didn't actually think there would be a grand-scale war, and if they did, they would have taken Washington, D.C. immediately after the First Battle of Manassas, which they did not do. It was
okay. So he is technically right there, at least. You know, the beginning stages of the war, people thought it was going to be over in like 90 days. Like, they didn't expect it to be as long and bloody as it was. I mean, this was a new stage of warfare. You know, mass production of resources, weapons, material, mass conscription. I mean, they were still based off of Napoleonic tactics. So, you know, of course, yeah, it's all this technological innovation, but outdated strategies. And also, for the most part, the Confederacy held on for so long because the general staff for the Union were incompetent, and they were old, outdated. I mean, like, they still had Winfield Scott as a general. Sherman and Grant, they were sort of relegated to the Western Front, where they had the Potomac Army with McClellan and the other generals there, who they were soft. They didn't have the stomach for combat. They were incompetent. So really, the Confederacy held on for so long because they were up against an incompetent general staff, and over time, Grant and Sherman and other generals, more battle-hardened generals, took control and finished it.
It was only as things got worse and escalated that the Confederacy decided to actually march into Union territory, and oh boy, did they fail miserably.
Yeah, so that's Antietam, which is funny because Antietam, the Union forces only found out about it because they found the cigarette box with the battle plans. So, like, yeah, so that was one instant. And then Gettysburg, where it was a pretty close call, but then, of course, General Pickett's charge essentially decimated the Southern forces, and they were forced to retreat. So we had two instances of Southern Army, General Lee invading Northern territories, both ending in catastrophic battles.
Gettysburg, everybody knows how that went. Texas, being in the South, geographically was like, well, what choice do we have?
Again, he's trying to say, oh, well, Texas, we're just poor little boys, and we just didn't know. No, they were very much enthusiastically for secession.
If they remain a Union state, how will they connect to other Union states and transmit supplies? What is
through the shipping, because the Union Army had the Anaconda Plan, where they completely blocked off the ports and any sort of shipping lanes. So, yeah, that's how they would have maintained it, is through the shipping.
This even do for them? Now, you could argue the Union would have ease of access to entering Texas, and thus you would have a pincer move on the Confederate states. But the issue was actually simpler than that. When the states were seceding from the Union, Texas, nobody thought it was going to be full-scale war. They just thought, well, our neighbors are the Confederacy, so, we're going to side with them. The idea that California and Texas could come together? How?
Yeah, so that's sort of, I don't know why he went on sort of a history lesson for that. Now, California was a state at the time, but they were sort of separated. So in that instance, yeah, there's a geographic issue there because there's just like the Western territories, and then California sort of separated from the majority of the fighting. But even in the Western states or Western territories, in like New Mexico, there was some serious fighting unfolding there. So yeah, I don't exactly know why he brought up the first Civil War to talk about this fictional depiction of Texas and California working together, but I just had to make my comments because he's trying to portray Texas as though they were reluctantly members of the Confederacy because of geography, when they were very much enthusiastically in support of secession. Where you had the governor Sam Houston delaying that secession, but ultimately being overruled.
It wouldn't be able to be unified in anything. They're separated geographically.
Have suffered a very great defeat at the hands of the United States military.
Okay, so right there is a good one. In the reflection, you can see the map of the United States, and there is California and Texas, they're blue. However, they say at the very beginning, 19 states had seceded.
Of the United States military.
Hey, I like 28 Days Later. Annihilation was kind of weird. Ex Machina was meh.
President, do you regret the use of airstrikes against American citizens?
Airstrikes against American citizens. Why?
They're moving to D.C. today.
We need to go down there.
Why would they go to D.C.? Another question.
Because the Western forces are attacking D.C., so of course journalists are going to follow the Western troops.
Journalists on site in the Capitol. Every instinct in me says this is death. Blooded.
Every time I survived the war zone, I thought I was sending a warning home. Don't do this.
That's a good line, man. Every time I survived a war zone, I thought I was sending a warning home. Don't do this. How many veterans have said something similar, man? But I do have questions, I do. And I suppose it remains to be seen, right, as to why the Western forces are trying to storm into Washington, D.C. I got news for you. Occupying a building does not a government make. Have a nice day. In a real civil war, there's no reason for California and Texas to be unified, and there's no reason for them, even if they are, to actually try and take Washington, D.C. Now, if you go back to the Confederacy and the old Civil War, why was that different? Well, as I stated, if the Confederates took it seriously and actually thought civil war or wide-scale war was likely going to happen, they would have, after winning the Battle of Manassas, the first Battle of Manassas, they would have just stormed into D.C. They were very, very close.
So, in essence, he's not incorrect. They were close to the fighting, to the Capitol. But, again, just like completely marching into Washington wouldn't have been a cakewalk, especially that early in the war. But yeah.
They thought that repelling the Union out of Southern territory was enough. They were wrong. See, the thing is, back in the day, occupying buildings did matter, and occupying cities did matter, because you scattered the capability of individuals to organize, and they would struggle to then reorganize. Once you controlled a physical space, you could put pressure on other locations and crush morale. Your capital has fallen. We have your buildings. You no longer have the means to organize. The Confederacy didn't do that. Today, why would...
Now, of course, now we're sort of entering sort of like hypothetical alternate history timelines. I don't necessarily think, of course, if the Confederacy did by chance follow and pursue the Union Army after Manassas and then gone on to Washington, that certainly would have caused a breakdown in morale. But I don't believe that would instigate immediate surrender. I believe Abraham Lincoln would have probably just relocated to New York or some other city. I mean, if you look at other earlier wars, I mean, his argument is that occupying a city sort of breaks down the command structure. But I mean, if you go back to, say, Napoleon's invasion of Russia, they went to Moscow, which was not the capital, that was St. Petersburg at the time, but still an important city, like the cultural heart of Russia. And that they did nothing. They just burned down the city and then continued fighting. So, yeah. And then also, again, like the idea that the Confederacy would have had the capabilities to continue, to march onto a city like Washington, which was even in the early stages pretty heavily fortified. I mean, there was some time between the election and the inauguration. There was some time before that and Manassas. So by that point, it was pretty heavily fortified. So again, this is more just like alternate speculation.
Would that not work? Because the federal government is digitally organized. In the event that the Capitol building falls, all they need to do is send a text message, everybody organize here, the government stands. Communications is one of the most powerful tools in warfare.
But here we are.
There's some kind of misunderstanding here. What? We're American, okay?
Okay. What kind of American are you?
What kind of American are you? Oh, yeah, okay.
You don't know?
You don't know?
The Western forces will reach the White House on July 4th.
Why? Why would the Western forces reach the White House?
Again, it's a movie, so it's not a real situation.
Get in the car!
In a world where the country is being destroyed.
I'm
and then you can see attacks on DC and all that stuff. There is. Okay. I want to be a little bit more reasonable. There is reason to strike DC, but let's be like, here's the issue.
I mean, the reason is that it's the capital, so that's a pretty important, position to take. So, I mean, even if there isn't a complete breakdown of the command structure and communications, it's still a heavy morale blow. So again, if we were talking back in the first American Civil War, if the Confederacy did manage to overrun Washington, D.C., that would be a heavy, morale blow, especially early on, and there certainly would be pressure for surrender. Depending on whether or not Abraham Lincoln would follow that, who knows? But again, it didn't happen, so that's all speculation.
In the event of a civil war, capturing D.C. doesn't mean all that much, considering there's field offices in other places, there's building in other places, but it matters to a certain degree.
Oh, so, I mean, yeah, he's right. So there would be repositioning. There would be, they would probably go back to Philadelphia or Boston, New York. Again, there's other cities that they can relocate to. I mean, the idea that the president, although like cinematically, it's like sort of nice to imagine that the president wouldn't abandon the city. More practically, either he would be in like a bunker under the White House or relocated. So yeah,
you would have to an enemy force attacking the United States would have to flatten all of DC, basically eliminating every single HQ, taking away organizational capabilities. Yeah, with modern communications tech, it'd be fairly easy to recover, to be honest. But there are still some materials that would be lost, and that matters. That matters. It's not the same as it used to be. Even in the event the Confederacy took D.C., it would not have been the end of the war. But it probably, who knows? It could have been a decisive victory. When the South took D.C., if they took D.C., they could have easily then rallied support internationally because it would appear that they were winning, on the verge of winning, and that matters. Never forget, in the War of 1812, the British burned down the White House. The U.S. forces were trying to steal Montreal. And for that reason, D.C. was unprotected. But that didn't mean the United States government fell or anything like that.
Nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
God bless America.
I'm actually really excited to watch something like this. I think the imagining of what it could be like and how it would go down would be particularly interesting. Give me a reason why Texas and California would be unified, though. I mean, they're today very much at odds.
So, yeah, so he's just highlighting a little further. He is interested to watch. He's really hung up on the Texas-California sort of alliance. My theory is that it's a paper-thin alliance, and I would even theorize further that in this film, when Washington falls and then the federal forces collapse, that all these factions and alliances, now with this, power vacuum, they turn against each other. So that could be sort of like a darker ending to the story, to the film, that, okay, yeah, we defeated the big bad president, but of course, now we're turning against each other because there's, it's all about power. It's all about taking control. So who knows? Maybe after this, Battle of Washington, where the federal forces are capitulated and collapsed, the Texas and California troops turn on each other. So who knows what happens?
I think even someone who was writing this 2 or 3 years ago would recognize California and Texas are very much at odds. And if you go further back, they're even more at odds. Also, how do you transfer resources between the two states? And that being
so, again, they're pretty self-sufficient. So, I mean, they did show the map of like states like Nevada and Arizona, like being New Mexico being a part of the federal troops. So maybe they consolidated that control, because again, those are pretty lightly populated states. So who knows? Who knows how that happened? Yeah, I mean, there is, because they can't really do it by shipping, because there's the whole, they maybe through the Panama Canal, depending on if that is even in operations. But yeah, I mean, the idea that how would they share resources? They're probably self-sufficient enough that they don't have to share resources. But again, we'll just have to watch the film.
being said, they mention that 19 states have seceded. So I wonder if they call it the Western Forces of Texas and California, not because they're unified together, but because California and Texas are the largest states among the 19 that seceded. And they're considered major, major strongholds for the Western forces. I think it'll be fun. And I think it will be enlightening to a lot of people, some of the concepts they present in this film. So, without further ado, thanks for hanging out. The next segment will be coming up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL.
Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much his observation and response to it. So that's overall what I wanted to, comment on, my initial observations of the Civil War trailer, and then also just seeing what the right-wing, alt-right response would be to it. And I think this is more of a measured response from like an alt-right sort of commentator. Who knows what else other commentators are saying. But yeah, as it gets closer to release, it's spring 2024. It's probably going to be greater discourse and greater sort of commentary on this. I mean, again, these sort of cultural war grifters, their commentaries, it's free marketing in essence. And a lot of these right-wing people, they'll watch it just to hate watch it, just to call it, trash. But hey, but yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I'm not necessarily excited to watch it, but I am intrigued, and it's just interesting to see what they would say about it. And of course, a lot of people are talking about the Texas-California alliance. Who knows what reasonings they have for that? So yeah, but otherwise, that's at least my response to the trailer and my observations, and also just giving greater historical context to the first Civil War, which very much is relevant as we talk about a second Civil War. But yeah, of course, if they release more content about this, trailers, I'll certainly respond to that, and then also just observe what the right wing is saying. But there we have it. So appreciate you listening in, and certainly support the work, and thank you for your time.